Welcome everyone to tonight's CCL training program. It's a weekly webinar of Citizens Climate Lobbies that provides CCL supporters like you and I with access to in-depth training opportunities on topics related to climate change and effective climate advocacy. I'll be your host tonight, Brett Cease, and thank you so much for joining us. We are here tonight to help you as lobby leads feel more supported as we go into details about the special role that you play as lobby meeting leaders. It's absolutely crucial, one of the most important places and roles that you can play in CCL. The lead makes sure that our teams go into the plan or into the meeting with every meeting with a plan and with everyone knowing how to work together to ensure a successful meeting. You might be listening into this call live or later on with the recorded version because you know you'll be leading a lobby meeting this coming June, or because you realize you might be needed in this role, or simply because you want to keep deepening and understanding your understanding of how we train you to lobby. Regardless, we are glad to have you on this call. And joining me tonight is my dear friend Ellie Sparks, CCL Senior Director of Programs. I, again, Brett C., CCL's Vice President of Programs. And our three learning goals are really the following, if we've done our job well in the next hour. We want to have the chance to highlight the important role that you play as lobby meeting leaders. We want to make sure to emphasize the importance of advanced planning so that you can think through ahead of time with some of these helpful recommendations how you can get your team set up for success even before you get to DC. And we want to demonstrate some of the actual concepts in action. How do you navigate or adapt to potential challenging situations as a leader? We'll role model a couple of those scenarios here throughout the call. We're going to take this in the order as follows for our agenda. We'll start with highlighting the importance of meeting leads. We'll talk about, again, how you as leads have the big picture as leading a team, but everything like we do else in CCL is about building those relationships. In this case, you're going to work to create good relationships among members of your team and ultimately then your team and your member of Congress. As we dive into the nitty-gritty, though, please keep in mind that this overall importance of building connections and relationships is key throughout the themes tonight. With that, though, I'll pass it to you, Ellie. Thank you all so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brett. Leadership is crucial to our lobby meetings. And as you know, thoughtful leadership is time-consuming because it requires self-reflection as well as getting to know your team. Many of us have had to step outside of our comfort zone to be a leader. In the past 18 months, all of us have had to navigate CCL's expanded policy agenda, which added 3 primary policy areas in addition to our first and favorite policy area, carbon fee and dividend. We hit the ground running with the expanded policy agenda just as the 118th Congress began meeting in 2023. Carbon pricing, clean energy permitting reform, building electrification, and efficiency and forestry. So you all have demonstrated your leadership with regards to the expanded policy agenda, so thank you. I have a couple of meditations on leadership. I'm going to read these quotes for you. This is from J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. It is a curious thing, Harry, but perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it. Those who, like you, have leadership thrust upon them and take up the mantle because they must and find to their own surprise that they wear it well. I think many of you might admit that leadership has been thrusted upon you and you are stepping into that role. Here's another one. Ronald Reagan. The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He is the one that gets the people to do the greatest things. So you'll be doing this as you lead lobby meetings. You're not the star of the lobby meeting, but the people in your lobby meeting are. And then Eleanor Roosevelt. To handle yourself, use your head. To handle others, use your heart. Keep that in mind in your leadership of lobby meetings. We know you have a lot of commitments in your life and a lot of demands on your time. So thank you all for accepting the mantle of leadership, for lifting up others to do great things, and for joining us tonight to learn how to run CCL lobby meetings so you can show up on lobby day with your heart open. May you be delighted by your team's possibilities, and may your member of Congress and their staff leave you tickled by their willingness to help. So thank you. Before we go further, let's take a quick review of what makes constituent lobbyists so powerful in meetings with our members of Congress. A lot of us feel nervous going into a meeting, and that's a normal feeling. Let's remember that our advantage is that we are constituents, not professional lobbyists. So although we want you to behave professionally, you don't have to try to be a professional lobbyist. This is as true in the US as it is for our volunteers in Canada, Australia, or any other country. Relax and be yourself. Do whatever helps you get into that empowering, listening place ahead of your meetings. I personally take some deep breaths and take in the space around me. I also remind myself that I'm part of a team of great, capable people. Part of what sets CCL apart in the eyes of our members of Congress is that we are ordinary people who care deeply about the future of our planet. As one of our admirers in Congress says repeatedly to his colleagues, these CCL lobbyists are seeing us on their own dime. You know that as ordinary human, you or your team members might make mistakes. It's not a big deal. In your lobby meeting, you might wish you or a team member had phrased things differently or said things better. In tonight's training, we'll show you how to handle a situation like this. Remember, we are building relationships, so be human and embrace whatever happens. Most lobby meetings are short. Some are very short and some are longer. Regardless of the length of time, how you facilitate that meeting plays an important role. As a lobby meeting leader facilitating the meeting, you are well positioned to nurture and empower others by showing your faith in your team. You can give people roles that might be a stretch for them. Look for coachable moments as your team members stretch into their new roles. You can empower your team members by putting them into situations where they can both succeed and fail. Welcome the failure and allow them to learn from it. Collective power means everyone builds skills and knowledge. Leadership means allowing others to build skills and confidence. As a leader, you can give others the chance to shine. Our team is only as strong as its weakest player, so let's help everyone grow. Your work as a leader occurs in the lobby meeting. It also happens during the planning and practicing prior to the lobby meeting. Your leadership shows up in how you reach out to your team in advance of the planning meeting and how you follow up with your team after the lobby meeting. The meeting leader is like a conductor of an orchestra. The leader manages the lobby meeting, but does not dominate. A leader helps with the transition points, like moving the conversation from one team member to another, or from one agenda item to another. A leader helps get the conversation back on track. They wrap up the discussion if someone on the team is taking too long, and the leader closes the meeting. A leader listens to the team members, looking for opportunities to have them shine. If constituents and the liaison are present, the leader also ensures the constituents and liaison speak. If the lobby meeting leader is the constituent and or has a long-standing relationship with the office, then of course the leader speaks in the meeting from that perspective. A leader observes the facial and body cues, reads situations, and responds accordingly. In some cases, the member of Congress or staffer might demonstrate their interest in one of your team members in particular. They might want to learn more about what that volunteer knows about climate change. You can go with the flow and let that volunteer speak up a little more than you had originally planned. As a leader, keep in mind our overarching goal for lobby meetings. We want to deepen our relationships with Congress. We want to demonstrate our interest in their perspective. So aim to have the member of Congress or staff speak at least half of the time. CCL volunteers have been building relationships with members of Congress for more than 15 years. You are part of a legacy of volunteer leaders who have developed policy savvy, grown their skills, and demonstrated the grassroots support to pass effective bipartisan climate legislation. Many leaders especially enjoy empowering and mentoring young adults. Members of Congress also value young voices, so if possible, involve youth and young adults in your meeting. Find out what expertise they may have. You might be surprised. Now, many of us older adults rely on youth and young adults to help with technology in our daily lives. I know I rely on my daughter to help me with my cell phone and computer. And it may be true that many young people feel comfortable with modern technology. Not every young person wants to be tech support. Just like adults of any age, youth and young adults bring a wide range of experiences, perspectives, knowledge, and skills. Find out what they bring individually to the table and make room for them to shine as well. Now I'm going to pass it along to Brett for some advanced training.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ellie. And thanks again for everyone putting in the chat where you're calling in from and all of the questions. One quick thing before we jump into advanced planning, we also wanted to make sure to remind people that this year in particular, we're asking people to bring letters from a trusted messenger to DC. Local chapters have been working on getting these letters from community leaders, faith leaders, local elected officials, you name it, a variety of places that people have been looking in their district, calling for climate action. And the goal of sharing these letters in your meeting, not only to show the trusted voice advocating for climate action, but to also demonstrate that we have connections and outreach in the district. Bring it up during the meeting when you think is most relevant. The message implied here is that with these leaders' letters, we're not alone as CCL advocates. We're calling for climate action in a larger body of people in the community with voices that they listen to and trust, and including people that they might know or respect that feel the same way that we do. So if you haven't heard about that, we can spend more time in the Q&A, and I have put a link to that template in the chat where you can find that on your own time. But with that, though, let's actually jump in. Again, that's the message. We're not alone in calling for climate action. And here's someone who might know or respect who feels the same way that we do. Let's talk, though, about advanced planning. So basically, we want you to think with us tonight about some of the important considerations to keep in mind as you help your team with advanced planning. And we're defining that really advanced planning. This concept is the time that you take now ahead of your actual lobby meeting to plan, and how you can use it to empower your team during this stage. So I'll start with the first section, and then I'll pass it back to you, Ellie. How do we set up lobby meetings? Well, first, we use a system that depends on CCL congressional liaisons as the designated point of contact with each congressional office. Give a huge round of applause around wherever you're calling in from tonight for the important role that our congressional liaisons play. All of the appointments, the 400 meetings plus that we're setting for DC, are being coordinated by your CCL congressional liaisons and our amazing liaison support team on staff, Mindy and Jen, or somebody they designate. If you're not a liaison, please do not try to set an appointment on your own. You can find out about how to become a liaison, and we'll put a link to that in the chat. And you can also find out to contact them through that same link. We want to make sure to really defer to the wisdom of our liaisons. And we also want to provide a wonderful resource that you can have for lobby leading, for meeting planning. And that's basically called CCL's Meeting Plan Template and Outline. It can be used as a guide to solicit and figure out discussion questions, to prioritize your team's ideas for the meeting. And the key items that it always include concepts like, what will we appreciate the member of Congress for to open with? What is the primary goal for the meeting? What secondary ask do we want to bring up? What are some of the open-ended questions that we can prepare for discussion? You can find that plan and guidance on the resource page that I just put in the chat. And just know this, if there's a primary liaison, but they aren't going to be part of your lobby teaming, they are going to be reaching out to you as the lead to offer suggestions for your lobby meeting plan. And they probably will have already started to fill this out to help you kind of think through these situations. If you're in a situation where, as the lead, you aren't often in touch with that member heading into DC and this summer lobby day. We also want to think about your lobby team. We aim to include all lobby day attendees in lobby meetings on lobby day. As such, you might find yourself with a team comprised of only constituents. Or you might have a team that includes CCL volunteers who live in the same state, but not in the same congressional district as the meeting. Or you may, in some cases, find yourself with a volunteer who actually lives in another state. Please make sure that everyone feels welcome. We especially in meetings want to prioritize the voice of the constituent or constituents, but we want to make sure that you, even if you're being asked to lead a meeting for a different district or state, have that chance to include everyone in your welcoming process. And we want to thank you for helping make that happen. One other quick thing I'll just note before passing it back to you, Ellie, is on that same page as our meeting plan template, we have now updated specific templates or example meetings that you can see as an outline for what it might look like, pre-filled questions for a Republican member of Congress or a Democrat member of Congress. So that's a great resource that's available to you if you want to check that out from that meeting plan template. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Ellie.
Thanks, Brett. All right, so if you can, contact your lobby team prior to traveling to DC. This isn't always possible given the timing of your travel, but if you have time ahead of your departure from for DC, then you can introduce yourself as the lobby team lead via email. You can connect the team to each other via text, and you could reference the email that you just sent. So text everyone, tell them you've just sent an email. You've connected everyone by text. It's so nice to be connected by text during the day of lobbying. People can text each other if something comes up. Find a time to meet in DC during the conference. We've created extra room in the conference schedule to make it easier for you to find a time to meet with your teams. Brett is going to put a link in the chat with some times that are available, and we're going to list the rooms that are available for meeting in person at the conference for planning. You can ask your team members which role they want to play in the meeting. It may not be the role you give them, but it helps to know what they'd like to be doing in a lobby meeting. You can include the link to the bio for your member of Congress so folks can study up in advance. You can share our links to CCL's basic lobby training in case they have missed any of that. Now, when you do meet with your lobby team to plan the lobby meeting, we've got a recommended agenda for the planning meeting. So first, invite everyone to introduce themselves to the rest of the team. We love introductions. Then review the previous meeting notes and let the team know how these minutes influenced your lobby meeting plan. You may have created the lobby meeting plan, or the liaison, if they aren't part of the lobby team, may have created a plan for you. If this is the case for you, we will send you those meeting plans when we send you your lobby schedule on June 5th. Now, if you still have questions, you can ask your state coordinator or your regional director. After reviewing the previous meeting notes, share the lobby meeting plan with the team and remind them of the primary and secondary asks. This June, we have 2 primary asks for every office. We also have 2 secondary asks for every office. You and your team can determine the order of these asks. Next, you'll assign roles and explain the responsibilities of each role. Confirm that everyone understands their roles and your role as a leader, and we're going to cover those roles shortly. Lastly, get the team brainstorming open-ended questions that relate to primary and secondary asks. Determine which questions the team wants to ask and who might be the person asking those questions. You might start this brainstorming with a review of what an open-ended question is. We're also going to review that in tonight's training. And if there is time, you and your team can run through the agenda with a practice meeting. And here's where you can remind your team that as a leader, you will facilitate the transitions verbally or with body language cues. Let your team know that a verbal cue might sound something like, Layla, would you like to tell why you are here today and what we're asking for?
Excellent. Thanks so much. And thanks for the great questions in the chat. Keep them coming. And we'll make sure again to build in Q&A time for discussion in just 3 more slides. So what to send in advance? If your team settles into a plan that you and others feel good about, you could email the broad overview bullet points of your agenda to the office ahead of time. That can include a list of your lobby team members and the quick bios, your primary ask one-pagers, and any other additional attachments that you might have to demonstrate support or evidence of popularity for the solutions that we're advocating for back home in the district. You don't have to do all of those, but we do recommend that ahead of time, it's great to have the office at least see the primary ask and have that kind of be clarified ahead of time for something that we'd like to have happen. We also know that this is based on advice from a great outfit and organization that we've worked a lot with throughout our years called the Congressional Management Foundation, which does basically surveys of congressional staff to ask their preferences. And they continue to find that staff in the meeting appreciate being able to prepare resources or questions in response ahead of time. So that really helps, again, set the agenda and deepen the conversation for the actual moment when you're there in person in DC. With that, though, let's talk a little bit more about the roles that volunteers play in a lobby team. We're going to have the chance to walk through a good 10 of them here, but just know that depending on the size of the lobby team, individuals can fill multiple roles. We encourage everyone to participate in the discussion. And like we've highlighted, we want to make sure if there's a jump ball, we give deference to the constituents wherever possible, right? They're the ones that we want to prioritize the voice of as they're from the district. So as Ellie's already highlighted, leaders are the team member who manages the meeting. That's you. They facilitate transitions. They make sure the meeting plan is followed. They empower everyone to share and feel that sense of participation. And if the leader is not the liaison, the leader is really encouraged and responsible for briefing the liaison after the meeting so that they can stay in the loop. Also important is the role of the appreciator, the lobby team member who shows appreciation for something the member of Congress has recently accomplished. If possible, there should be a constituent, and it doesn't have to just be on climate change. It can be on other legislation or other constituent services that they're doing in the district that you genuinely have thankfulness for. We want to make sure that somebody is also designated as our time monitor. This role asks at the beginning how much time there is for the meeting, keeps the meeting on time, alerts teams when there's only 5 minutes or other agreed upon time left, and then monitors the time during the meeting to really get a sense of, is it 50-50? Is the staff or the member of Congress talking the same amount as our CCL volunteers, more or less, so that we can have that estimate at the end, as well as a tally of the number of open-ended questions that your team is actually engaging during the meeting. You can see that we're a big fan of listening and using a lot of these techniques for motivational interviewing. We also have the all-important role of note taker. If a lobby meeting happens in the woods, but nobody's there to hear it, does it really happen? Right? Very philosophical question. The lobby team member who takes notes is the key person that is going to capture what is said and then record it for later use for a DC team, for the next meeting that lobby team is having. And if possible, we really recommend that this role is somebody that's an experienced volunteer, because then they can more easily key in, follow the conversation, know what's being talked about. And what we really want to capture again is what's said by the member of Congress or staffer, their body language, their nonverbal cues. Ideally, even that same day, then the note taker types in the notes into our online action tracker and submits it so we've got it captured. Other things like we've talked about already, the discussion, all lobby team members are excited to encourage and participate in that. We want to make sure especially constituents are engaged in active listening and offering reflections. We have the asker, that's the person that presents CCL's main purpose and ask for the meeting, that primary ask leave behind. If possible, this is also a constituent who has a strong grasp of the policy, its wider implications, its impact on the district. You want to make sure to leave that primary ask behind with the member or the staffer afterwards. The person known as the deliverer has the chance to make sure that they are bringing that leader's letter, or they are bringing the constituent letters, or the postcards, whatever you have as evidence of support beyond your lobby team that you want to bring to the meeting. If you don't have a lot, that's great too. If you have more than that, you can also highlight, hey, this is a demonstration of what we want to see or what you want to see from the district and the momentum that we're building. We also have the photographer role. This is really important for us to be able to have something designated to take a photo and to ask permission, obviously, that it's okay to share on social media afterwards so that we can capture and celebrate all of the impact we're having across Capitol Hill. And then our last two roles, we have the follow-up, the person that's sending that follow-up email with any materials that you talked about, as well as a thank you card after the meeting. If the person doing the follow-up isn't the liaison, we want to make sure that that role is also coordinating with the liaison so that they know what the next steps are. And then lastly, listening. All members are encouraged to be listeners. If you hear something that sounds like a topic to gain more understanding or lean in and ask an opening question, we want to make sure everyone feels empowered to ask more and use that opportunity to clarify with your member of Congress, really fill in that clarity with the dialogue. So like Ellie highlighted, the last thing that we'll highlight before going to our first round of Q&A here is talking about open-ended questions. Now, again, this might feel basic, but during the discussion time in the meeting, everyone in the lobby meeting can ask open-ended questions. That's why we're there. We want to understand where the members at, their positions, their hesitations, what might be holding them back, what we can be doing better. You name it, these types of questions invite a deeper answer. So in the chat, actually, what we'd like to encourage all 30 of us here tonight is to share an idea of what you think a good open-ended question is. Maybe it's one that you have used in the past for your lobby meetings, an old standby. Maybe it's one that's come to you right now in the moment. But as you're typing your favorite open-ended question in the chat, just a reminder, when we ask open-ended questions, we avoid questions that elicit a yes or no answer. We also tend to avoid why questions because they may feel accusatory or put your member of Congress on the spot, feel defensive. The only time we really want to be clear, crystal clear with a yes or no question is when we make the ask. Will you sponsor the Prove It Act? Or will you support advancing work on permitting reform in Congress? Those are our asks, and they differ from open-ended questions because we need to be clear and understand the position of the member of Congress. So, what open-ended questions have you come up with in the chat? Let's see what we've got. We've got Daniel sharing, what climate policy solutions are you most excited or optimistic about? That is a perfect question. Paul asks, what do you see as areas of agreement and disagreement on permitting reform? I love that, Paul. These are so good. Lita asks, what barriers do you foresee about X climate policy? That is great. And I love Ron's example. CCL's Hawaii's all-time favorite answer to how long do you have for our meeting today for the role of a time monitor? You have as much time as you need to convince me. That's great opening for the time monitor ask, and it sounds like it led to a productive 90-minute meeting. All right, we've got Craig asking this great fallback question. What else can you tell me about that? Tell me more. That's my favorite. I always fall back to tell me more if we can't think of anything else. Bill Marshall, where does closed loop geothermal energy sit in your priorities? All right, a very specific example. Great technology question.
All right. So we've got 2 primary asks and 2 secondary asks. And last week we reviewed them on a CCU, and Brett's going to put the link in the chat. There's also another CCU that we covered, sort of our congressional roadmap reflection. So that might also be worthwhile sharing. If you want a deeper dive into the asks, you can watch that CCU. All right, so our asks for June, we have 4 asks, 2 primary and 2 secondary. We want you to emphasize and spend the majority of your time on the primary asks, and those are Prove It and permitting reform. If time feels short, then pitch Prove It to the Republicans and ask Democrats about permitting reform. When it comes to secondary asks, please be empowered to read the room and assess how much time you have left. If your time has run out, then direct attention towards TSP Act in offices representing agricultural land, and focus on the Seedlings Act in all other offices, especially those with forests in their district. Please leave the 1-pager for any of the bills you discuss with the office at the end of the meeting. That might be you email them if they request that. So Brett, is there an update on permitting reform, or shall I proceed as we've got this?
Yeah, I think for now we're still waiting to hear the details of the bill that Ben mentioned on last trading. That Senator Manchin is working with kind of a bipartisan coalition to hopefully introduce a legislative package that includes a lot of the priorities that we've been looking for. And we don't have the specific bill number. It hasn't been introduced yet, but I can put a link to the Utility Dive article that's talking about the broad package here in the chat. And hopefully by DC we'll know more and have the chance to read through the bill.
Right. So it could be we actually have a bill we're advocating for, but in all likelihood, still we'll be talking about permitting reform in general. So it will likely to be not pitching yet a specific bill. This is kind of similar to how it was when we were advocating for carbon fee and dividend as a concept 8 or so years ago. This was, back before we had a carbon pricing bill that we could champion. So right now, in all likelihood, permitting reform is going to be something like that, although a little bit different. It's different in the fact that we've made some progress with permitting reform in the past year, and it would be similar in that we wouldn't be advocating this lobby day for a specific bill unless things move very quickly with what is possible with the Manchin bill package. All right, so instead we're going to ask that Democrats are aware that we think there is more work to be done with regards to permitting reform. So we want Democrats to help us get that job done. And we'll have a separate message for Republicans, and we'll cover that more at the conference. And it might be slightly different if we do, in fact, have this bill that we're working with.
Let's jump into discussing a couple more leadership considerations right before and then during and then after your lobby meeting. Let's jump in to an actual discussion of what you should be doing right before the meeting, right? So here you can see a great group of CCLers huddling up outside of the hall before they're going in for the meeting. You can see they're just far enough away where their discussion isn't really going to be overheard by part of the staffers, inside. And they're also modeling really good behavior to clog the entire hallway. Now, we want to make sure that they're actually kind of a little bit more bunched up, but we won't get into the analysis of the actual positioning. But you want to meet outside of the office prior to the meeting to have that set point so that everyone knows where to gather until you've all arrived. And then you can be careful about basically a couple of things. Remind everyone to relax. You as the lead get to model that kind of relaxation with your own body language, with your own sense of presence, and with your own ability to have fun right in that moment. Really realize the power that you have in that moment. You want to review everyone's roles one last time, confirm and reassign anything as necessary. You want to review the goals of the meeting, especially the primary and supporting or secondary asks that you're thinking about. And then you want to make sure to remind everyone one last time to keep asking open-ended questions and using those reflections back. It sounds to me like you're saying, or would it be fair to say that this is what you think? Until the meeting is, until the team is comfortable that they understand where the staffer or the member is actually at with each of the issues and positions they're on. You also want to remind everyone to watch or listen out for cues. And let's actually then talk about, speaking of cues, what a meeting leader does during the meeting. So that is a setup that we can jump into with your description, Ellie.
All right. So as a meeting leader, you will do a lot of advanced planning and preparation, and that's really important. We've been talking about that, but we can't let our plans and preparation go on autopilot. We practice ahead of time, but you never know what scenarios will ultimately play out. And that's why we always need to be focused on what is being said in the moment. As a team, be ready to help each other respond to what you're actually hearing, not what we expect or think we heard. As a meeting leader, you should recognize when it might be appropriate to diverge from your plan. We refer to this as situational awareness. It's the ability to perceive and understand what is happening in the moment and being able to react to challenges as they happen. Good situational awareness means you're not only listening to the words being said, but also the tone of the voice and the body language too. One of the benefits of having a team is that if you don't pick up on a particular cue from your member of Congress or staffer, one of your fellow lobbyists might. It's important for your team to trust each other to speak up when they see something. All team members should be empowered to ask follow-up questions and or redirect a derailed conversation.
And so basically a couple of things to keep in mind with that mindset of lobbying being a team sport. As team leaders, we want to make sure to empower others to thrive in their role with the lobby team. We want to move them forward, right? The best leaders are those that elevate those around them. And one of the ways that we can do that is by taking note of who isn't being heard if someone else is being too vocal. So to take note if there's a power dynamic going on in your meeting with one individual who just keeps speaking or dominating the meeting, it's our role as leads to make sure that all voices are present. I'm just going to keep muting there. I think it keeps accidentally unmuting. Another situation to look out for is the silent constituent. You may choose to encourage them to speak with a verbal cue. Something like, Susan, I'd like to just pause for a moment and see if there's anything else that you'd like to add to what we've been talking about. Really bring them in, ushering that chance for more people to participate. And so your whole team can have that voice and feel like they've been a part of it. We also want to think about a situation, with any of these transition examples, about what happens if somebody stumbles. We encourage you to try practicing them even out loud with your team so that it feels natural ahead of time. And then in the moment, you all know how you can kind of use these signals. So, what if somebody on the team says something that's flat out wrong during the meeting? Certainly happened to me, might happen to you. And rather than outright correcting them, try saying something like this: If I may, let me add to what Ed was just saying. Your team will appreciate you for not correcting them or pointing out that they forgot something. What could you do if a CCL volunteer actually then has the opportunity in the meeting to get so agitated or angry that their voice is raising, they're yelling, they act out of decorum? This isn't common, but it might happen. And so the best thing is to be prepared for it and to stay calm. And here's actually how that's going to play out. I'll play the role of an angry volunteer. I'll have a one sentence cameo in this amazing training, and then I'll pass it to Ellie, who will play the team leader. All right, ready? Scene. It's you guys in Congress who are stalling and making this worse.
Congresswoman, obviously, we're very passionate people, and we're working very hard to try to get something done on time. You were just saying that you think driving innovation should be front and center of any renewable energy agenda. Could we share with you more about what we've learned about how this global growing trend toward accountability for carbon emissions actually creates an opportunity for America to capitalize on its competitive advantage?
Excellent. Everything feels a lot calmer all of a sudden. Thanks, Sally.
All right. So the size of your teams will vary from meeting to meeting and the format you are going to use. If there are just 2 or 3 volunteers in a meeting, then each person will need to fill more than one role. If your team ends up being a larger group, it might mean some folks do not have to speak that much outside of their initial brief introduction story about what concerns brought them to the meeting. If you have a constituent joining by phone, and a few of you might, for an in-person meeting, allow them to introduce themselves, then turn the meeting over to those in the room in person. As a leader, you want to acknowledge and appreciate them for that. Having additional people in the meeting whose role is looking pleasant and affirming their interest is important. So even if they don't say as much, it's key to have volunteers present and to value them for that. Also, you may run into the situation where only minutes ahead of the meeting, one of your team members texts you to pass on that they are going to be late. Coming in late has the chance of disrupting the meeting significantly. As a result, you should be clear with your team ahead of time that the only time you would want a team member to try to join the meeting that is already in progress is if they are a constituent. Otherwise, politely let the group know that coming in late will disrupt the meeting and you will fill them in on the meeting afterwards. Now, given how much time and coordination has been put into the scheduling and planning process, it's key that your group feels empowered to do whatever it takes to keep your meeting focused and on track with only those attendees you are planning on having joining in with the meeting. So don't take any stray cats into your meeting. So let's move on to talking about what you should do immediately following the meeting. First, step around the corner, out of earshot of the office to debrief your meeting before the team members disperse. In the debrief, the note taker reviews their notes with the group and captures any additional notes from the team. Have people share what went well and what could be improved. Confirm responsibilities for the follow-up. Who is filling in the meeting notes online for CCL? Who is emailing the liaison if they weren't in the meeting? Who is sending materials to the staffer or member of Congress if that is requested? Figure out who's going to send the thank you note. In DC, many teams, while standing in the hallway, pass a thank you card around for everyone there to sign, and then one of the team members slips into the office and hands that thank you note to the receptionist. Pro tip, don't seal the envelope for a card you will give to them in DC, and that is for security reasons. A few days later, you as the meeting leader should confirm that the person doing the follow-up has in fact done so.
All right, a lot to keep in mind. We only have 2 more slides, and then we'll open it up for more Q&A here for the last 10 minutes or so. So we do, Ellie just mentioned the importance of timely completion of the actual meeting minutes submission. So let's just talk briefly about what that looks like. Um, the meeting minutes report tool used to be its own thing, and now for the last 3 years or so, we've embedded it in our action tracker, so it's even more direct. And we're going to be rolling out opportunity this year for you to fill in your meeting ID, which you'll get here with your lobby meeting assignment, and then it'll pre-populate a lot of this information for you, like who's a part of your team or who you're meeting with. So it should actually be even quicker. But I just put a link in the chat where you can find how you can log your meeting minutes, and also a great other standby training we've offered for many years that we won't go over tonight. But if you are interested to check out, it's called How to Take Great Notes. And again, a reminder is this is all the responsibility of the note taker. They're the ones that are capturing it all in the meeting and then submitting it online afterwards. These notes are confidential, so please check in with your regional director if you want to share them with anyone outside of your lobby team and the liaison if they're not a part of the meeting. It's really essential that we keep in mind that we're in the relationship building, like Ellie highlighted. So any breach of these notes really can upset the trust that we've been building with the office. And they're really important documents that help us build momentum. So as meeting lead, we really ask you to review the notes a final time with your note taker, just to make sure that they feel like they capture everything that was part of your meeting. We don't want them to kind of, miss out on the opportunity to really add additional context that you were witnessing to, or that you thought was important to make sure to pass on to our DC team. You can look at the meeting minute form ahead of time to get a sense of the questions they're asking. That again is also part of the meeting template link that I have. I'm not going to go through all of the sections tonight, but I would encourage you as leads to just go to our lobby meetings form right here and look at that ahead of time. Or in the chat, I'm going to put a link where you can find both the meeting minutes printout, as well as where you can ask any questions of our liaison coordinator team. And then lastly, what I'd like to close with, again, before we go into Q&A, up here is the little model here. So you click first on contact with the legislator when you're picking which action of our 5 levers, and then you're going to click on lobby meeting. And again, that's the short link to the meeting form, cclusa.org/minutes. And this is something that we have heard for many years from our DC team. And Ben just reminded us, our Vice President of Government Affairs, the same thing this last week during the trainings, and that is that we are more powerful than we really slow down to take the time to think of. Just even reading in your chat, Gerda, it really does hit you at times when you realize the responsibility as well as the opportunity that we have here by making it to DC and doing this as a coordinated effort across all the offices in one day. And just don't forget that in the heat of the moment, when you're trying to be mindful of all these details, just really ground yourself and your team in that power, that awesome power that we have collectively and as individuals, especially as leads. You want to make sure that you're walking out with specific actions that you can take to keep building the relationship with your member of Congress. You want to keep on asking those open-ended questions in your meeting until you get at the real heart of where people are at and where we can keep moving forward together. And you want to think about giving specific examples, specific businesses in the impacts. Who's going to see benefits from this? Who is receiving or who's already being impacted by climate change? What are the industries or the thought leaders that are supporting these asks that we're highlighting? We're going to talk a lot more about framing that from both the Prove It Act and permitting reform in DC. But again, it's really important that we highlight that this isn't just something that we want to see, but there's a broad coalition from both the right of center to the left of center looking for momentum on really scaling out and making sure that we're setting up the importance of capturing emission intensity on the goods that we're producing in the country. That's the Prove It Act, as well as making sure that we're accelerating the deployment of clean energy across this country. We need to up the scale and speed by how we're deploying and creating more energy on our grid that's coming from clean sources. So I know that you're all going to have an amazing opportunity ahead of you. And we cannot wait. Ellie and I will be at the Tuesday night reception. This is the last little thing I'll throw in here. This isn't actually even in the slides. But as leads, if you have anyone on your team that just is shining on Tuesday and they have a story to share outside of that meeting, know that on Tuesday night, Ellie and I will be co-hosting the wonderful lobby reception back at the Omni. And it's going to feature time for our first-time attendees to get up and share a 1-minute story about their experience lobbying. And so if that's you, if that's a member of your team, just make sure that they think about that opportunity. And we invite them to join us back at the Omni for the Tuesday night reception to hear those stories. So with that, though, you can always go at the bottom of any of our trainings, click that green button, or under the action tracker, click chapter volunteer development and then training to log your trainings. We'd always love demonstrating how many people are taking them. Thousands of people taking trainings every month. So we hope that you found tonight's training useful and empowering. We are so excited for you and your team heading to DC. Please track down Ellie and I when you get there. Let us know how we can best support you along with the whole CCL staff team. My email and the forums link are posted here in the chat. And to close us, I'm going to pass it to you, Ellie, for a quote, and then we'll stay on for any last questions.
All right, thanks, Brett. So above all, your work as meeting lead is to create a sense of connection among the members of your team and between your team and your member of Congress and their staff. Brené Brown defines connection in this way. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. Good luck to all of you as you work on creating connection between the members of your team and between your team and your members of Congress. And thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.